Good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I am the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us this morning for the third installment of our second season of Ideas, our Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement series. Ideas is a virtual DEI training series hosted by the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Visit Portland. This second season, presented by Springborn Staffing, will cover various areas of DEI training in an effort to help business owners and employees create more welcoming workplaces. The Chamber continues to collaborate with the Portland region's business community to facilitate programs, initiatives, and provide resources to make our region welcoming to all. Our Ideas series is a great result of that work. Season 1 was focused on providing vital racial equity training that covered inclusive language and workplace policies to diversity recruiting and the process of appropriately completing an equity assessment of an organization or company. Following that very successful inaugural season in spring of 2024, the Chamber and its partners reached out to the business community for input and found that there was much more work to be done. This season, we've expanded our training to include other areas of essential DEI training, such as LGBTQ+ awareness, ageism in the workplace, neurodiversity, trauma in the workplace, and much more. We've also been able to expand our reach, partnering with Visit Portland and Springborn Staffing, both of which have expressed their shared passion for providing free and accessible resources to all those looking to expand their DEI training, thus fostering a healthier workforce and workplace culture that is welcoming to all throughout the region. Today's topic, Neurodiversity at Work, A Guide to Progress and Retention, is presented by Carly Ott, board member of Autism Society of America. As a senior VP at a Fortune Top 50 company, Carly will lead an interactive session on current and emerging workforce trends on a variety of topics that relate to all those within or aligned with the neurodivergent business community. We will learn more about what professionals seek through employment opportunities and what benefits exist to better serve the neurodiverse workforce. We'll leave with a better understanding of what companies are currently doing to create welcoming workplaces, not simply during the hiring process, but also during the day-to-day. Carly will also provide us with some great resources for talent acquisition, retention, and more. Whether you are an employer or an employee, you are sure to leave today's session with a new set of tools in your toolkit. Like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free, will be recorded and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on the Chamber's news and events, visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Also follow us on social media for real-time updates as well. Links to our socials can be found on the bottom of our homepage at portlandregion.com. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard this morning. This platform provides an improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance our virtual events. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for our presenter today, you can type them in the YouTube chat throughout the presentation. Carly will answer questions when appropriate throughout her presentation, and will also reserve some time at the end for a Q&A session with everyone here this morning. So please do engage with us in the chat function during today's training. Excuse me. At this point, I'd like to introduce Kurt Gunderson, Senior Recruiter at Springborn Staffing, our Ideas season-long presenting sponsor.
Thank you, Rachel, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name's Kurt Gunderson, Senior Recruiter at Springborn Staffing. We are a full-service recruiting firm in Portland, and it is an absolute honor for us to sponsor this important webinar series on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. At Springborn, we see firsthand how diverse teams drive innovation, improve performance, and create more meaningful connections with communities and customers. We are so excited to hear from today's speaker, Carly Ott, Board of Directors of the Autism Society, to hear how neurodiverse individuals can thrive in the workplace, how they benefit the organizations they work for, and how all of us can contribute to a more equitable and supportive environment for neurodivergent professionals. From all of us here at Springborn Staffing, thank you again for joining us today, and let's make the most of this opportunity to learn, share, and work toward creating a better, more inclusive future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurt. Now, I don't want to take any more time away from Carly this morning, so with that, I will hand things over to her. Carly, lead the way.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you, Kurt, for sponsoring this amazing series. It's definitely needed in today's world because we've never had a perfect world, and we probably will hope that our grandchildren see that. But in the meantime, we can do every little bit we can to help make it better. So, neurodiversity at work. We're going to talk about neurodiversity today. I'll tell you a little bit about my story, why I'm here, why it matters to be aware and learn how to have a more neuro-inclusive workplace. And so we'll talk all about advocacy in the workplace and what you can do, as Rachel said, to ensure that you're have a welcoming environment and you're able to reap the benefits of this. I've got some recommended reading and a little bit in a little appendix, but we will focus on the main bit of the presentation today. And I do want to start with a little disclaimer. One of my favorite expressions that drives my 7-year-old crazy is "Po buddies nerfect." So in this presentation, there are going to be times where you're going to realize that something you thought was true was a myth, or that you were going about something the wrong way, and that's okay. Human nature is to not want to ever be wrong, but this isn't about being right or wrong. This is about learning. When you first encounter a math problem in school, you probably got the wrong answer, and that was okay because you were learning how to do math. Same type of situation here. And one of the things that is a growing movement in the neurodiversity and greater disability community is that we're a community, which is almost as if we have our own unique culture. And a lot of the communication challenges with neurodiversity in particular can really be explained by cultural differences. So if you approach today's session with that in mind, I will try to give you a little bit of warning when I'm going to get to a slide where you may walk away thinking that negative feeling of I'm wrong. But again, try to approach it as a learning opportunity. You're here, which tells me that you are open to learning new things. And so I'm here in my capacity as a board member of the Autism Society, and we will be making the presentation available afterwards so you can read more about us. But it's our 60th anniversary, so we're very excited about that. I've been on the board for 10% of the organization's history because I just finished up my 6th year. And I've gotten to know so many amazing people along the way, thousands of autistic people, parents, other affiliates and board members as well. And you guys are one of the lucky areas. Autism Society of Maine is amazing. I've known Kathy forever. She's been there for, I think, 28 years or something like that. Susan, Jennifer, Tara, they're all really amazing. And they actually have a ton of programs and educational opportunities, conferences, and they also, as we go through the presentation, I'll probably mention them from here time to time because they have some great employment resources on their website. And I checked in and they said, if you guys are working with an employee, that has some challenges that you're trying to figure out how to do an accommodation for, they said they're more than happy to help with that conversation. Just give them a call or email them. Some really great folks over there. And so for me, I am a mother. I have a 7-year-old. And I thank my father for getting up early in his retirement to take him to school this morning. I do enjoy writing, and of course I'm a self-advocate. And as Rachel mentioned, I've advanced to senior vice president at the company I work for. I started off paying utility bills about 15 years ago, and I'm really lucky that I ended up with leaders that saw the skills and talent that I had and the fact that I could think differently. I actually get paid to be neurodivergent and come up with new ideas for my company. And I've really enjoyed my time on the Autism Society board. My first 6 years, I was on the board in my capacity as the chair of our Council of Autistic Advisors. I just rolled off of that, but now I've been elected as a regular board member, so I'm keeping that up. And I am really excited to be here. And one of the reasons why we are here is because there's a lot out in the world that really revolves around children with ADHD, children with autism, children with dyslexia. And the thing is that, the goal for anyone is to spend the majority of your life as an adult. And so really, there's no magic wand when we turn 18 to magically cure us of whatever our challenges are. So in the world of like medical research, there are so many studies about children and, solving problems for children. Honestly, if there's a new experimental thing, I'd much rather try it out on myself than on my kid, but someday we'll shift the tide there. But even just with your health insurance, a lot of health insurance companies require prior authorization every year to get ADHD medication, which is something that, if you ever heard the term disability tax, it's something extra we have to do to spend our time on, or extra money we have to pay because we have a disability that other folks don't have to. So when it comes to the amount of energy you have to spend in a day, ours can be a little bit bigger because, it's that time of year when I have to go through the hoops to be able to still get the medication that lets me do a good job at work. So we are going to talk about some words that might be new to you. Neurodiversity itself is not about any one group. It's the entirety of the human condition, the variety and the way that all of us think. Neurodivergent are those of us that are outside the bell curve. And there's other things too that you might hear. Common synonyms for neurodivergent are, sometimes people say neuroatypical, but that's too much like neurotypical, which is the opposite of neurodivergent. But neurospicy is a new one that a lot of people are throwing around. There's a wide number of other ones, but if you see neuro before something that sounds like different or exceptional or odd, that's typically talking about us. I have an autism diagnosis as well as ADHD. And I recently learned that I have something really out there called dyschronometria. And when you read about dyschronometria, if you try to Google it, there's so little known about it. It actually, Wikipedia needs a major overhaul. But there's a wide variety of diagnoses that fall under this umbrella. There's also the concepts of identity first language and person first language. And many years ago, some well-meaning service providers put forth that we should always have person first language, where I would say, I am a person with autism, but as some really cool memes go, I can't take my autism off my shoulder like a purse and set it aside. I am always autistic. It's part of my identity, part of who I am. So a lot of the community prefers the identity first language. However, if you noticed on my bio slide, I was a journalism major. I used to be a newspaper editor. So I will pepper in both just because I like the variety of language occasionally. But those of us that consider ourselves part of a community, if grammatically it works, we'll often use identity first language. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I have a friend with cerebral palsy, and they laugh like you wouldn't believe whenever I say, oh, you want to be identity first? That means you're cerebral palsic. It just doesn't work with English. So, and other languages have different ways of working as well. Neuroinformed. understanding and acceptance of different neurotypes. So hopefully by the end of the day today, you will be more neuro-informed. A neuro-inclusive workplace is really the goal today. And then, of course, last but not least, trauma-informed. I will bring up trauma a couple, periodically. And I believe Rachel said that you guys have another session about trauma. Chronic post-traumatic stress disorder is something that is a real reality in our community. Whether you grew up dyslexic and were told that you were stupid because nobody realized you were dyslexic, and you ended up losing out on a lot of opportunities because you couldn't learn how to read, or if you were ADHD, always told you were wrong, you're hyper, sit down, sit still. You weren't allowed to explore the world as you experienced it. Or with autism, a lot of negativity there, a lot of therapies trying to have us suppress the expression of our autistic reality. So of course there's bullying as well. Years and years and years of bullying really can change how we perceive the world and how we react as well. And some of the examples I give will later on will come from that space. But now for the meat of the presentation, a little bit of trivia. So I think you guys all have access to some comments. And so I'd love to hear from you. Compared to their peers, companies that are disability inclusion champions do they have higher or lower profit margins, and by what percent? So I'd love it if you guys want to put some guesses into the chat, and see what do you guys think? Higher or lower profit margins if you're a disability inclusion champion, and what percent? So I see a couple of 20% coming in, or 25% coming in. And, this is one of those things that one of my favorite papers that's out there, I have it linked later on towards the end, has some really amazing statistics. We got a 10% higher, and we'll go more than 20%. Yep. All right. Well, the real answer is 30% higher economic profit margins. So it's really, pretty amazing. And I'll explain why in a little bit. One more trivia item. What would be the boost to the United States gross domestic product, to our GDP, if just 1% more of the disabled workforce found jobs? So there's people with disabilities out there want to work, have the skills to be able to work, but can't find jobs. If just 1% more of us got jobs, what would be the boost to the US GDP, do you think? Thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, gajillions of dollars. How much do you think? Because this is one of those things where if everybody knew this statistic, you'd have a lot more people clamoring. So, okay, we got, let's see, we got 10%, somebody did a 10% boost. We're looking for dollar amounts. What do you think the dollar amount would be? 10 billion, millions. All right. Let's see, 2 billion. All right. Let's see, one more answer. Anybody wants to harbor a guess? 20 billion. Okay, well, 1.5 billion. The answer is $25 billion boost to the US GDP if just 1% more of the disabled workforce found jobs. Some of the statistics for unemployment for the disability community are, can be found every month on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, but the subsets are a little bit harder to get. Autism ranges from 60% underemployed and unemployed, to some folks say 80, but we're having a hard time tracking down where that 80% came from. So here's some numbers for you. And I've got the links to the sources down below. I've been tracking the BLS's unemployment rates for years now, and I check it almost every month, and typically the disabled unemployment rate is twice that of the non-disabled unemployment rate. This month we got a little bit better. Last month we were definitely over double, but there was 1 month where we were not even close to being double. We had a really great unemployment rate, compare ratio to the non-disabled population. And that was the first month of the pandemic lockdown. And so the running theory is that a lot of us were already working from home, and a lot of people that weren't got laid off. So our unemployment rate looked great that month compared to others. So some really, really interesting information here. And one of the ones I love is in the bottom right corner. Accommodations don't have to cost money. And we'll get into some examples later. And I do know that, legally you only have to provide accommodations if you've got more than 15 employees, but hopefully some of these benefits will, and the ease of how to provide accommodations that we'll go over will help you realize that it doesn't have to be a scary thing. It doesn't have to be terrifying. And like I said, Autism Society of Maine is more than happy to help you figure out some neurodivergent friendly accommodations. And the place where I got the statistic is the Job Accommodation Network. It's fully funded by the Department of Labor. They have the most amazing database of ideas of, you got this challenge, here's some example accommodations. And they, in the last couple of years, the gentleman that was in charge of things related to autism at the Office of Disability Employment Policy really worked with them to blow out what they have for neurodiversity. So it's really amazing. Great resource. But let's talk about the secret diagnosis. So this is one of my favorite little cartoons of a woman from the 60s or 50s, I don't know. But hey, it's a secret. And what this refers to is the fact that when we talk about neurodiversity, most of the time it's an invisible disability. I mean, sometimes you can recognize, traits that may lean towards that, but technically it's invisible. Many of us are able to identify, to recognize our own because we, have so much in common from a cultural perspective, but when it comes to the actual, looking at all the people in the room, who's got a diagnosis, who doesn't, that gets a little bit more challenging. And when we talk about neurodiversity, again, it's really hard to get good statistics on how many people have it, but the estimate right now is about 20% of the population. And given that 25%, somewhere between 25 and 28% of the population are identify as disabled, you can tell that's going to be a Venn diagram, not a subset. So there are a lot of folks that are neurodivergent that do not consider themselves disabled. A friend of mine has a I think it's a Slack group at her work that they did a poll to ask all of their neurodivergent employees whether or not they considered themselves disabled. About a third of them said, yep, I'm disabled. A third of them said, oh no, I am not disabled. Don't you ever even, say that I am. And the other third said, I am only disabled when I need to ask for an accommodation. So that leads to a phrase that's been used a lot lately, disabled by society. And so when it comes to that, people don't realize that we're different, and our difference is not something that requires a wheelchair ramp per se, unless we have a coexisting condition. But it's more along the lines of, we're a little bit different. We're a little quirky. We don't follow the same social rules as everybody else because they're just not intuitive to us. And so we may or may not feel comfortable disclosing, but if you are able to create an environment at your company where people do feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work and disclosing, and they're not having to be closeted and hide who they are, you will find that some of us become your longest tenured employees. Bank of America has a site there in Maine that is part of their support services division, and they have staff that does things like processing the mail, or printing the T-shirts for the volunteers, because they got close to 200,000 employees worldwide. A lot of different things that support services does across their various sites, but they've been around since the year that the ADA passed, so like 1994. They've had that division, and some of the employees have been there since 1994 because they love their work, and because they're in a neuro-inclusive environment that is very, friendly to them. They don't want to leave, because if you do leave, who knows what you're going to end up with. So you create a good environment, chances are we'll be some of your longest tenured employees, and we all hate the cost of attrition. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And when we talk about how to get to a place where you have a neuro-inclusive workplace, you've probably heard about, autism awareness, ADHD awareness, all the other awareness months, all weeks, days, and a big push lately for acceptance. Like this is April, it's Autism Acceptance Month. Autism Society, we started to change the terminology around it. If we're one of the first to start using that phrase. And I do want to point out that in the middle, what we don't often talk about is understanding. So in order to truly accept another person for their differences, you really truly have to understand where they're coming from. And so the examples that I'm going to be going over in the next few slides are really going to help you, hopefully, to gain that understanding. And now we get to one of those disclaimers. This next slide is one that might make you a little uncomfortable. I'm going to hope that you're aware of a few of the things, but this is from one of my favorite people on my LinkedIn connections. A couple of them have put together a nonprofit in the UK called Disabled by Society. So forgive the UK spelling on a few of these, but these are some examples of things that would, they're a little cheeky. So non-disabled privilege check bingo. So the concept of privilege can really extend to this as well. If you have gone your whole life being able to apply for a job without barriers, that is amazing. I was just talking to a friend in Texas that's trans and neurodivergent, and she decided she needed to get out of Texas. So she was looking for jobs in New England and was having challenges because she does need to work from home. And so unless the company said that the post was remote, she didn't even bother applying because she couldn't risk that she couldn't get an accommodation to work from home for some reason. And unfortunately, the way the law was written, employers do have to do accommodations during the hiring process. So like if you need to be able to review materials with a screen reader, or, you need closed captioning on a web interview, whatever the case may be. However, they don't have to approve a work from home accommodation or any other type of accommodation that you need to be able to do your job before you actually start working. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for us. So, think about that. I know that the cost of desk space is high, and you need to have bodies filling it. But if you are not, a company that is having folks be able to work remote, do consider that you're missing out on a good chunk of the workplace. Accessing education without barriers. Last Saturday was the anniversary of the 504 sit-ins in the 1970s. Judy Heumann led the one in San Francisco, the last of the longest, 20-something days. And she became a disability rights advocate because as a little girl, she couldn't go to New York City public schools in her wheelchair. She actually won a landmark lawsuit against the New York City school board or school district because she went to college to become a teacher, and they wouldn't hire her because they were worried that if there was a fire, she wouldn't be able to get out of the building without assistance, and they couldn't guarantee that somebody would help her. So it's one of those things where historically we've had to fight for every little bit of privilege we could get. And so if you're aware of these items, you have the opportunity to think twice. I'm happy to connect with any of you on LinkedIn. If in follow-up you are like, well, how does this apply? Why is this a thing? I'm always happy to answer those random questions because I am all about opportunity. And so with neurodiversity in the workplace, I always like to say that invisible disability is the last piece of the DEI puzzle, because disability as a whole, we did get our legislation early on. We had the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and of course the ADA in 94. In the UK, they didn't get their Equality Act until 2010. So we were a bit ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, but we are still the group that is okay to make fun of. We're still the group that's okay to stigmatize. We're still the group that's okay to say, oh, well, it doesn't matter, they're disabled, don't have to include them. So we're still fighting that uphill battle as are the other groups. But I do want to point out that some of us are like really good at things. Like I am really good at figuring out how complex processes work and interact, and how technical systems interact with each other. I gather copious amounts of information, and I'm able to pick up all the little details, and I'm approaching problems from a different angle every day. My area of expertise is documents, but I'm sitting in my dining room looking at a bookcase over there, and I've got 3 whole shelves filled with books about late 18th dynasty ancient Egypt, because I am somewhat of an expert in that. So you never know what area of expertise we may have, and it may or may not be the same thing as the degree that we have, but we're also going to be more inclined to follow instructions exactly. So if you have a high risk situation or an area that is prone to have a lot of errors, we may be the ones that you can rely on to always do whatever it is they're supposed to do, to the letter. And one thing that's true of all aspects of DEI, all of the affinity groups, is that we do have a different perspective on life. We've had, anybody with disabilities has had to find ways to work around challenges in their everyday life. I have something called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome on top of my neurodivergence. It's very common actually for autistic people. And so that means that my tendons and ligaments are a little bit looser, and I will just get random injuries. When I was unpacking my house when I moved in a couple of years ago, totally got an injury in my foot that's usually only found in like high performance athletes and professional dancers and whatnot. And so I had to pay the disability tax to have, a company deliver me a shop stool that I could use to sit on to wheel around my house so I could finish unpacking. So that is a perspective that I've carried through my whole life. So I'm constantly given challenges just to survive, just to live, just to get through the day. And I've developed over the years a really amazing skill of, how to make things more efficient, how to solve the unsolvable problem. I literally had an executive send me a bundt cake once because he was so excited that I figured out a workaround until tech was able to give him a release, 6 months later. Everybody else had been working on it for 6 months. I have it for 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, it's really complicated, but here's what you got to do. And, different perspectives. But of course, there's also, especially with autism, some of us are honest to a fault. It actually cuts us to the core. It can be painful for us to lie or to have to, I call it enduring an untruth. So if somebody is walking around with an assumption or a belief that is not true, it is really hard for us to just sit with that without spewing 1,000 facts that show why that other person is wrong. But as I said at the beginning, nobody likes to hear that they're wrong. So, and I'm turning 50 this year. It's easy for me to, say this now, but I did spend a few decades ruffling a lot of feathers and upsetting a lot of folks with that honesty. But I do want to point out that while there's a lot out there about how exceptional everybody is, there are people in our community that don't like things like the superpower narrative, because some folks are just people trying to get a job, and they may or may not be aware of any particular thing that they're exceptional about, or maybe they never were able to get the education to be able to realize something that they would have been exceptional at. So one of the things that is often talked about in our community is, you meet a person with autism and say, oh, what's your superpower? Not everybody has something that they can say. It took me a really long time to figure out what I was good at professionally. And out of respect for the folks that don't like the superpower question, when someone asks me what my superpower is, my answer is always untangling necklaces and holiday light strings, because I actually am really good at it. When my mother and I lived across the country from each other, whenever we were going to be visiting, she would hand me a baggie full of tangled up necklaces, and I would just sit there chatting, like not even paying attention. And, 5 minutes later, they'd all be untangled. I don't know why. I'm really good at it. I don't have to pay attention. Sometimes my son will tangle stuff up just to give it to me to untangle because he's amazed by it. So you never know where someone's superpower lies. I suppose I would be really good on a fishing boat untangling the nets. Ooh, alternate career opportunity. But another statistic at the bottom from that report that I was quoting earlier in the trivia section, when you are committed to ensuring that people with disabilities have the equitable access to things, you'll end up with twice the income as your peers over a 4-year period, according to the studies. You get more talent, more innovation, and it really makes a difference. Plus, as customers, we are very loyal to companies that are neuro inclusion champions or disability friendly. We will put our money where our mouth is. And another one of the statistics is the disposable income for working age people with disabilities is actually $25 billion. That is greater than the Black and the Hispanic populations combined, according to this 2018. It was I think it was quoted in the Accenture report. They got it from someone else, but they do give their references in their report. So a big customer base out there too. So what are some of the challenges though? So when you're recruiting, if you're able to think about how you're going to be wording your job postings to make sure that it just covers what is the reality of the post. Don't throw in extra things that aren't real. Even just, oh, you must be able to lift 30 pounds. Well, you actually have to lift 30 pounds. You just need to have one person in the office that can lift the box of paper up onto the shelf. It doesn't have to be everybody. But similarly, with executive functioning, we may have some challenges that we have to overcome. And I always get a kick out of the fact that it's called executive functioning, because most of the executives that I know have an assistant that does a lot, can help with them with a lot of these things. So keeping the calendar, keeping the inbox up to date, paying attention to the correct things for the tasks at hand, switching focus at the last minute. So with some folks that are neurodivergent will be very hyper focused on something and really in the zone. One of my favorite experiences during the pandemic lockdown was my kid was only 2 at the time. And so we had him home from daycare, of course, for a while. And I had a little art station set up to my desk. And I have no idea how much time passed. I was interacting with him. I went to my computer and was, working on something. And I looked back over. Next thing I know, he has painted his entire hand and arm, both hands, both arms, all the way up to the elbow with bright blue paint. And I loved it. It was amazing. I took a picture, have that forever. But I didn't get mad because he was exploring what he could do with paint. And it's Crayola washable paint. It's easy to get it to come off. But, I was not paying attention. I had switched my focus. And next thing I know, I have a blue baby. But on the flip side of that, he's also neurodivergent, and he got me at a great level. So, before he was able to really, communicate verbally, and a lot of his communication was just with pointing and whatnot. It was so cute. He crawled up onto my lap while I was working. I was hyper focused. So whatever he'd done previously to try to get my attention must not have worked. So he crawled up on my lap, put his little hands on either side of my face while I was looking at my computer screen, and turned my head to look at him. So he knew how to get my attention. And he wasn't upset or mad. He just knew, hey, that's what you got to do to get mom's attention. And once he got my attention, he got whatever it was he needed at the time. So, but it's a little bit different. A lot of folks would get mad if you're calling someone's name to, get their attention and they don't hear you. And when I didn't get my autism diagnosis till I was 28, actually. And when I got it, my parents looked into it a little bit. And I think one of the first things they said to me was, so all those times we were standing 2 feet away from you, calling your name for dinner, and you didn't respond because you were watching TV or reading a book or whatever, you really couldn't hear us, could you? And I'm like, nope, I did not hear you. I was not trying to be a brat. I just didn't hear you. So when you keep this in mind, you can have a much better interaction all around. And that hyper focus, that in the zone thinking, that's when you're going to get some of the most innovative ideas or the most productive work. So if you did have a habit of interrupting employees to ask them about things when you need it, yes, you may be the boss, but is it really that important that you need to interrupt a hyperfocus moment. From a long-term perspective, it can, like what is the gain? Because that hyperfocus is when we're able to, potentially even do things faster than other employees, do things more accurately, do things in a way that benefits you in the long run as the employer. So it's okay to say, hey, I'm going to probably check in with you twice a day. And, based on the meeting schedules, I think I'm going to probably check in at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. So that way we're aware, we know, we can schedule in our calendar. And because if we don't know that we're going to get interrupted and it just comes in as a shock, it can take like another half hour to get back into that zone, to go back in. So if you are reading a book and you set it down for 2 weeks and then you go back to it, sometimes you have to go back and read the last few pages to remember where you're at. For us, it's like that with hyperfocus. Is we can't just snap out of it and snap back into it. We have to go through a process to get back to where we were. But remembering details is something that we can have challenges with, or we can be exceptional with. So it really just depends on what the details are. I have 7,000 lists. My iPhone has more alarms on it than you've probably ever seen on a phone before. So I will forget things. I panicked on Monday when I realized I forgot to send my kid to school with a show and tell. Luckily, the teacher said, don't worry, you can do it tomorrow. So he's doing it today. But I can tell you where there's a random paperclip behind a picture on a top of a counter somewhere. I'll remember really random things. I'm very much a visual person when it comes to my memory. I'll also remember audio things really well too, but I can't remember the written word. And I figured this out when I was in elementary school, actually. My social studies test had a question and I'm like, oh, I do not know what this answer is, but I know it's in the caption of the photo on the bottom left corner of page 93. Did not answer that question correctly on the test, but as soon as that test was over, I opened the book and looked, and sure enough, the answer was in the caption of the photo on the lower left corner of page 93. So I call it having a quasi-photographic memory because it's not quite as good as having one where I can remember those words, but it's something that has really, helped me a lot over the years. And yeah, avoid saying or doing the wrong thing. That's the one where we really have to think about it as a culture. So for most of us, the social skills that we've learned, especially those that some folks with ADHD and a lot of folks with autism, we're going to not necessarily know the right thing at the right time. Some of that goes to our, core need for truth and honesty that I talked about. But think of it as we have to book learn these things. So I'm taking an approach with my child to teach him how to live in the world. One of our esteemed philosophers from the Renaissance came up with the idea of the social contract. So I've approached everything from a book learning standpoint like that. So the first lesson was, hey, when you are entering or leaving a room, or somebody you care about is entering or leaving a room, you say hi or bye, depending on the situation. And so that tells the other person that you notice them, that it matters to them, that you are or are not present. And it's, just a nice thing to do to let someone know that they matter to you. Prior to that, he would not even say goodbye to me when I would leave to go to the store. It just didn't occur to him that was important. And now he does it almost every time. So that, or another fun one, because I think he was like 4 at the time. In the United States, we generally will walk down the right side of the hallway or the sidewalk, or we drive on the right. And that's so that anyone going the opposite direction, if they're on their right also, we don't run into each other. So he loved the visual of me saying, oh, so we don't bonk each other on the head. But, before that, he would just run down a hallway wherever he wanted, because it never occurred to him that there was a system, there was a pattern, there was a way we go about doing things, so that we can all live together in the community. We can all work together. So if you have an employee that seems to be doing this a lot, it can be helpful to approach it from this standpoint of presuming competence. So presume that if they're doing something quote unquote wrong like this, that they may not realize that it's going contrary to social norms. So privately, separately say, hey, I noticed something that seems to be ruffling some feathers, and would you be open to talking about it so that, perhaps you can learn how to make sure that people don't get upset like so-and-so got upset the other day, or, that type of a thing. Give them a chance to say yes or no, or maybe later. But the idea is that they just may not realize that what they're saying or doing is not appreciated. Because, again, back to that sense of justice, if someone is, going down a path that we know will not work because of how our brains work or for our past experience, we have an incredibly hard time not just blurting that out. And so give them an alternate option. Just say, hey, if you think somebody's doing something wrong, shoot me an email or shoot me an instant message, however you can normally communicate that is more of a private channel. And, if I agree, we'll do something about it. Or if it's the type of thing where I want to let that person figure it out on their own, we may have to both just sit back and cringe while we watch what unfurls. But if it's going to really make a difference for the company, save us money, save us, reduce our risk for other things, make us more profitable, whatever the case may be, if we need to, we can address it in a way that, again, nobody likes to be told they're wrong, preserves the self-esteem of the other person as well. And I do want to mention too the multitasking. So the myth of multitasking, something a lot of folks are familiar with, where we may or may not actually multitask. So obviously we don't want to be texting while driving, or using a handheld device while driving. We want hands-free. That's one of the more common examples of not being able to multitask, not being able to do things consistently. But for things like ADHD, multitasking seems to be the only thing we do, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily do it well. So I will have so many emails open on my work computer by the end of the week that I will actually not be able to open calendar invites because I have too many Outlook windows open. You may not have known that there is a limit, but I can tell you there is. I hit it almost every week. I will draft an email, but then I like to reread them, make sure they make sense, because when I write an email, I do not write it sequentially. I'll generally write here, there, and this, and there, and interject this over here and that, like that. Like that's how I write emails. So I do like to reread them before I send them, because I have learned that I will confuse people if I have not put it in a order that other people will understand. But that means that I'm also multitasking, because I'm in this meeting trying to finish this email, and I'm trying to do this presentation, and I'm trying to do this, and trying to do that, because I have a little bit of a problem with planning and organizing to make sure that I get things done on time. And this is actually managing time with ADHD, it's really common that they'll get distracted and go off and do this, and then they end up not finishing things on time. I have dyschronometria, which takes it to like a whole other level. So it's not just about being hyper-focused and losing track of time or being distracted and not having enough time to finish things. Dyschronometria is when you have the complete and utter inability to estimate, in particular, how long it takes to do things. But that extends to other things too. I can't tell you how far it is from here to there, how much that weighs, how old someone is. I can't put a number to anything. I can tell you if a layout is off by 1 pixel, but I can tell you relative sizes. This is bigger than that, but I can't tell you the number. Drives my dad crazy. Oh, how much did that cost? I don't know. I have zero frame of reference. I have to look up the receipt or look it up on the store site to see how much it is. I will not remember unless I intentionally memorize it. And when it comes to time, I have no clue how much time has passed. If I didn't have a clock right in front of me, I wouldn't know that I have now been talking for almost an hour. Would have no clue. And it's not just because it's a subject I'm passionate about. I will think that it will just take me a minute to write the email, but in reality, it took me 5 minutes, and now I'm late for the meeting. I know how long it takes to drive to where my kid gets his swimming lessons. And last time I took him to swimming lessons, I kept that in mind for when it was time, so I set an alarm to make sure that I would leave, time to get there. But we were late because I forgot to account for the time from when the alarm went off to walk to the door to the garage, put on shoes, put on jackets, get in the car, open the garage door, put on seat belts, back out of the garage, close the garage door, go down the driveway, onto the street. And then I got to my drive time. And then I also forgot parking, walking to the building, checking in at the front desk, walking to the pool, changing my kid out of his street clothes. So yeah, we were late because I had not memorized how long all those other things took to do. So I did not have an accurate perception of when we needed to leave to go to swim lessons. So I'm giving you these examples because I want you to realize how pervasive it can be in our life, and how there may be something that you don't get why it's a challenge, but it could be. The key is that this is an invisible disability, so the things we have challenges with are generally invisible. And there are going to be some of you that know what I mean by 42 being the meaning of life, but a lot of us find that we're reverse engineering life. And so what works for neurodivergent people works for everybody. So for us, some of that past trauma of being utterly surprised because we didn't pick up on social cues. If you send a meeting that just says quick touch base with no agenda, I can tell you that we are going to panic and think that you're wanting to have a meeting with us because we're going to get fired. Pretty much going to be universal on that, because we missed out on random things that did not, realize what was happening, and then suddenly we're the problem. So guess what, though? Everybody benefits from having an agenda on a meeting, being able to prepare ahead of time, think about the topic, to be better contributors to the topic. Being able to have a clear guideline from from an employer to say, I expect you to take a 15-minute break in the morning and a 15-minute break in the afternoon, and a minimum of 30 minutes to lunch so that you can rest, relax, recharge. I do ask that you make sure that not everybody's taking their break at the same time. So we have to coordinate schedules, but I do expect that, because if you don't actually say that you expect it, then they're going to see other people not taking breaks and be worried that they're not allowed to take a break. And then they get burnt out and stressed by the end of the day because they haven't had a chance to go, to a quiet place and recharge and reset their sensory systems. And so they're going to, some of them are going to do it, and no matter what, because they have, learned that they need to do it, and that's important. Others are going to get confused by the mixed signals. So you do run the risk that the autistic person will tell on the folks that aren't taking their breaks, but that's for you to work out whether or not you want that or not. Just say, hey, I understand some people don't, but I really mean it, that it's okay for you to do it. You won't be penalized. Arbitrary nature of the world. With this whole social contract thing that I'm approaching life with for my son, I've had a rule where I never tell him just because. Whenever he has a question, I either tell him the answer, we look up the answer right then and there, or if I can't, because I'm driving, I'll say, we'll look up the answer when we get home, and we always do. And actually, I think I owe him, I need to look up what are the muscles in your body that let you wiggle your ears. Some people can wiggle their ears, some people can't. He wants to know what muscles those are so he can try to practice to figure out how to wiggle his ears. So I do owe him that one. But there was only once that I've ever had to really say, I don't know, and I don't have a way to figure it out. And that's when I taught him the word arbitrary, because the folks that aren't neurodivergent, we refer to them as neurotypical. The neurotypical folks sometimes do things that just don't make sense to us, and nobody's really figured out why yet. And so for him, he couldn't understand why he had an argument with another kid and that he thought was his friend, and they left the school at the end of the day very mad at each other, and the very next day the other kid just was acting like everything was normal and that there had been no argument the day before. And so I had to explain, I have no idea why neurotypical people are like that, why they are okay with not continuing to be upset until someone apologizes, why they seem to forget things like that on occasion. And I don't know why. But what I can tell you is that you have a choice. And this is something that a lot of neurodivergent adults never were told growing up, that they had to figure it out as they got older. And for those that had a lot of trauma, some of them are still very angry about what they went through, have gone through in their life, and have not yet figured this out. And that can inform, and cause even more negative social interactions. But I told my son, you have a choice. You can either continue to be angry at your friend and continue to not be friends. If they try to do something with you, you can walk away. You can not talk to them. You can say, leave me alone. Or you have the choice to say, okay, I am going to decide that I would rather be friends with this person than be angry with them. And I am going to go back to the way we were before the argument. And I'm choosing to be their friend. I like that outcome much better. And so that is a little bit of the how. I can't tell him how to forgive, but I can tell him what choices he has, why we believe people do things differently than other people. That how and the why are huge. When I was growing up, my parents would just tell me to don't let the bullies bother you. Well, how? How do I not let the bullies bother you? And while my answer to my son on his social situation wasn't necessarily a very detailed explanation of how, it at least gave him a choice, something that he could do A or B. That was his how. So knowing the how and the why are huge. So if you have an employee that doesn't seem to be getting it, doesn't seem to be, understanding things that have never really been taught to you, if you can take a moment, take a breath, and think about what is the why and how do I expect them to act or react or proceed in this situation. If you can frame it in that context, they're much more likely to be able to learn from it, especially if it's very soon after the incident and not a week later at your one-on-one. The more time that passes after an incident, we're not going to remember the emotions that we were feeling at the time, the exact situation that unfurled, to be able to extrapolate from that and learn from that, to be able to do things differently in the future. I once had an executive say that I needed to work on my communication skills. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm always being asked to speak on topics, and I'm an award-winning journalist, and I'm not sure what communication skill you're talking about. And what they meant was that I needed to be more aware of my audience when I was speaking in meetings at work. If I had a business executive on and technology people, I shouldn't get really into the weeds with the technology partners to explain a concept to them. I should say that we're going to take it offline and do a follow-up so that the executive doesn't get completely confused and we're wasting their time on the call because they have no idea what's going on. So not having the specific context around it, and I still don't know what call it was that this happened on. So it took longer than it would have for me to be able to redirect that. But if I'd gotten the example immediately after that call, I would have been able to absorb it, like, okay, I get it. This is what happened. I remember the conversation. Okay, I can make sure that I'm more approaching it from a different perspective in the future. And then, does the consequence fit the request? So sometimes we get really confused again because things don't necessarily add up. Early in my career, when I was working for a different company, I was at a staff meeting. I gave a process improvement suggestion that had just popped into my head when someone was talking about a problem. And next thing I know, my boss is writing me up for speaking out of turn in a staff meeting because he felt embarrassed that I hadn't discussed it with him first and allowed him to be the one that present it. It didn't occur to me that that was a thing. Everybody benefits by the idea. The executive loved it and wants to run with it. Like, I don't care about getting credit for it. I just want the company to do better. So I gave the idea. And so it was never told to me that I wasn't allowed to speak in staff meetings. And so, it can get really confusing. And there's one of the anecdotes that I've known for a long time. There was a young man that was trained to be a paralegal, and he got his first job working in a law firm. And the supervising attorney, gave him an empty folder and said, "I need you to do this research, and and I need it for court on Friday. So make sure I get this folder back by then." Well, this new paralegal went back to his desk, thought about the assignment, I'm not really sure how to do this, how to go about this. I'll think about it tomorrow. I'll think about it tomorrow. Think about it tomorrow. Thursday night. Oh, he said he needed the folder back by Friday. Put the folder on the attorney's desk on Thursday night. Friday morning, the attorney opens the folder. It is empty. And this is a situation where, understandably, that employee did get fired. But for him, because he didn't know that he should have asked right away when he wasn't sure how to go about doing the assignment, didn't know that he was supposed to alert the attorney. He thought he was doing the right thing by giving the folder back. So in that case, yes, the consequence did fit the request. Other times, you'll find there will be situations that just don't make sense. And so that's one of the reasons why, accommodations can be a dialogue. You got to work together to figure out what will work best. And it's definitely okay to have consequences. But you do want to keep that in mind, that your neurodivergent employee may be coming from a different perspective, a different culture. Just like, we all know that different expressions and different things can mean different things. I work with folks all over the globe, and it was really confusing for me the first few times I was meeting in person with colleagues from India, from my technology team, because I would be explaining the requirements to them, and they would be sitting in their chairs going like this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they don't like my ideas. They don't like what I'm saying. They don't want to do it. What am I going to do? And then I find out that culturally, I don't know if it's all of India, but at least in some parts of India, shaking your head like this while someone's talking means I understand. So that was them subconsciously letting me know that they understood what I was saying. It wasn't that they agreed or disagreed with it. It was just that they understood. So different, shaking your head from side to side in America means no. In India, it can mean I understand. Maybe some of them do also use it to mean no. I don't know, but I learned when it is just a really subtle back and forth movement, generally means I understand. So cultural differences can make a difference, whether it is related to geography or neurotypes. So when it comes to interactions, I'm speaking about some of these things. Lack of eye contact does not mean lack of interest. And this is really funny because a lot of times neurodivergent people, autistic in particular, would be like, eye contact's really hard for me because nobody ever explained to anybody, eye contact is actually just looking in the general direction of the people you're speaking to. I am pretty sure that if I were to interview at your company for a job and I sat there like this the whole time, staring at your eyes, making eye contact with you, you'd be pretty weirded out and you probably wouldn't hire me. But that's what we thought you meant by eye contact. Now, it can help those of us that have challenges with eye contact. It can help us to focus on something inanimate so that we can hear you and we can listen to you. If we are told that we have to look towards you while we're interviewing, it's not a sign of dishonesty to look away. It's actually us not having a running dialogue in our head. Remember to look towards them. Remember to look towards them. Got to look in the general direction, but don't stare at them. So I'm kind of looking around over at them while they're talking. Maybe I'll even throw in a head nod because I'm told that that means assent and that I'm supposed to do that to show that I'm listening. Oh my gosh, I wasn't listening. I was thinking about what I'm supposed to do. I totally missed the question they asked me in the interview, and I'm going to have to ask them to repeat it. And now I'm probably not going to get the job. So lots of different things about that. I do also recommend that you look into what sensory issues are like for folks that are neurodivergent. But I do want to make sure we have time to talk about accommodations a little bit. So this is not changing the job requirements. This is about changing the environment in which you do your work to enable you to do your best and to do your best for the company. So if you've hired someone, it's because you believe they can do the job. And if you need to start making sure that, there are agendas on meetings, or that they can, wear noise canceling headphones if they're unable to filter out the noise around them. I have a work from home accommodation because I can't filter background noise, and I also cannot filter motion either. So if somebody walks past my cubicle or the window to my office, whatever the case may be, I will look up every time and get distracted from whatever I'm working on. I'm less productive. But working from home, I can control my environment, and I'm able to ensure that I am the best employee I can possibly be for my company. That's an example, but the requests do have to be reasonable. I can't work with people. When I took the career assessment in high school to find out what the perfect job would be for me, it came back that I would probably be best suited as a forest ranger on top of one of those towers, looking for fires in the middle of the woods. This was before I knew I was neurodivergent, so I just thought that was hysterical. And because I had no idea why I pulled that out of nowhere. But I think it was probably because I said I would prefer to not work with people, because people were confusing at that time. I could not figure out why I couldn't figure out how to get along with people. I always seemed to be upsetting them. They always thought I was mad because I would forget to put facial expressions on when I was concentrating. A lot of us are convinced that the resting fill in the blank face, RBF, is really something that was developed to describe autistic women that were hyper-focused on things. But another unreasonable request is if you're hired to be a phone operator, but you can't answer the switchboards and be around the phones because the ringing is too noisy, like it's probably not the right fit for you for a job. But the other piece is accommodations are not just about when you get a new job. If there are process changes or procedural changes or shifting needs of the business, you're introducing a new product, whatever the case may be, or you get a new piece of technology in on the manufacturing line that they have to learn. Accommodations can happen at any point in someone's career. And you really just want to take a step back and say, okay, they're one of my most productive employees. I need to make a change. I know that they have challenges with changes. So can I give them some extra bandwidth to be able to come and ask questions about the new process? Can I actually let them take home a copy of the process map and procedures because they want to be able to read it and learn it after hours, because it might take them a little bit more time than someone else to absorb the change? Can I, if they had been in a sitting spot on the assembly line and now they're going to be standing, can I get them a tall stool so that, they can continue to at least have some of the same environment as they previously worked in? When I moved across country with my kid and he was going to be in pre-K here, went to this, luckily he'd been going to a national chain daycare. So we came to the new site a few days before he was going to start going there. And they let us just stand in the doorway. And I asked him to point out to me all the things that were still the same. And that process helped reduce his anxiety of having to go to a new place, meet new people, because he realized, oh, that's the same kind of chairs. Oh, they're eating something for lunch that I used to eat at lunch at my old place because they're ordering from the same menu off from corporate. Things like that can really help. Same curriculum. There's still going to be some things that are the same, even if something's different. But if you've got somebody who is a back office paperwork processor and you are shifting, the shifting needs of the business mean that you're taking that team and having them do cold calling to try to get new clients. If somebody says, I can't do cold calls, I just can't. If they're neurodivergent, that could really honestly be true. I mean, for the first, decade, I had to call the doctor's office on my own instead of my parents calling. I would script it out ahead of time, like all the different possible things I thought they could say and how I would respond. I would spend an hour writing it all up before I could even pick up the phone. I still have anxiety about doing calls like that and dealing with things like that, but at least I don't have to actually script it on paper, but it can still be challenging. It's a lifelong thing. So think about that and, see if there is a way that, maybe they can process the reports of all of the people that do the cold calls rather than actually having to do the calls themselves. Is there something that everybody else has to spend, if you've got a team of a dozen people, everybody else is spending a half hour a day doing something, maybe that half hour thing the other person can do so that those other folks that are good at making the calls can keep making the calls so that, lots of options there. And I know we are just about at time, so I'm just going to skim through. We've got some other things, if somebody has a shoulder injury, you're not going to have them stock the top shelf. Similar situation, work with people for their strengths. I've got some examples, some tips on communication, social interactions, why it matters for someone to have a diagnosis. Some really insightful things here from folks that I've spoken with around the world. And then, of course, the must reads, and then further information, some books that I highly recommend, including one that's for children and one that was written by one of my favorite people, Diego. I've known him since before he wrote the book. And now he's graduating from high school with honors using a alternative communication device. Is a non-speaking young man. He's pretty amazing. And then I got one more of those graphics at the end too that you'll be able to, you can look at later, but Disabled by Society resources, quite a lot that can be very informational. And you may think I can't win, but you can. You just have to stop, listen, learn, and be willing to work with someone who comes from a different culture. And so I think we do have a few minutes left. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. But like I said, you'll be able to get these resources at a later date. We'll be sending out the deck. I did notice one typo that I'm going to go back and fix because the newspaper editor in me won't let it live that way. Let's see. So we've got questions. You seem to be focused on a certain facet of neurodiversity, but what about other types? Anxiety, Erland syndrome. So Erland syndrome, you're going to have folks that are going to want to have different colored glasses that helps them be able to focus and be more clear. So somebody walks in with blue glasses or pink glasses. It may not be fashion. It may be that they've got Mears-Erland syndrome. Learning disabilities like dyslexia, there are somebody may need fonts, or they may need software that they can use for dictation, or even screen reading software to read them things. You can have also Grammarly can help folks with dyslexia a lot to be able to write more professional documents. OCD can manifest in different ways. Sometimes, it just really depends on what their thing is. But a lot of folks I know with the OCD are going to have more challenges with change and need more advance notice on change. So that's why the Job Accommodation Network, I highly recommend that for examples of ways to overcome challenges. Everybody is different though. And when you want to have that more neuro-inclusive environment, really the key is understanding that things that are invisible can be different, and being open to dialogue and conversation. Because if we feel we are working in a safe environment with, leaders that are willing to work with us if a new challenge arises, if we have leaders also that make sure that I say it's the one-time trickle-down economics works. If the leadership makes it known that it is that the value people that are different, value people that are neurodivergent, that it is not okay to bully them, to make fun of them, then that can really make a huge difference. That can make people who wouldn't otherwise stop before saying something negative or making fun of someone, it can make them stop. And real stories from leaders make a huge difference too. I work at a company with 200,000 people that is actually very, neuro inclusive and friendly compared to a lot of other folks that I know. There's situations, but we still only have about 24 people that are at the senior vice president level or higher, like I am, that are out as neurodivergent. The more leaders that are out, the more people realize that it's not a burden, it's not a hindrance, that it can benefit if someone you respect, has that as well. And, it's honestly, the inclusive environment is really about understanding the differences and making sure people know that they have a safe place to ask for help if they need it, that they're also being recognized in a way that they appreciate. One of my favorite bosses would ask every new employee, how do you like to be recognized? Privately, in public, only with money, with awards? Like what are the different options out there? What do you prefer? And she would make sure to respect that. So if you do not like being called out in public as being an outstanding employee, she would only ever do that in private, because she would respect that it would utterly terrify the person. And that worked, again, what works for the neurodivergent person works for everybody. Everyone benefits from that type of thing. But yes, the unspoken rules of corporate culture, if someone's violating it, take a step back. They might not even have a diagnosis. The average age of diagnosis for autistic women is in their 40s or 50s. ADHD, a lot of folks never found out they have ADHD. My 80-year-old father realized recently that he probably had dyslexia, because when he thinks back of the challenges he had learning to read, and he reads about the challenges of dyslexic people, but they didn't do that in the 1940s in a one-room schoolhouse that's now part of a historical village in his hometown. But, it's really, what I hope you take away from this is that, you really want to ensure that you are willing to accommodate, willing to work with them. Don't assume bad intent. And I do know we are at time, so I hope that this is this has been useful. And accommodations never have to disclose diagnosis. When you ask for accommodation, you just have to be able to articulate the challenge. You may need to have a doctor willing to back you up that it is related to a diagnosis. But hopefully, like I said, the Job Accommodation Network has tons of great information about that as well. So thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, Carly. Just such a wonderful presentation the entire time. I could have continued. This could have, going back to our call yesterday, I feel like, this could have continued for hours. But, if I look, something we mentioned in our previous conversations, if we and we do in this situation have some questions that didn't, I think some of your presentation content did touch upon them, but if people did want to continue the conversation with you, you did reference your LinkedIn earlier, and then there are some resources, of course, in your presentation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm happy to, if I can help with specific questions, I'm happy to do so. Just, reach out to me on LinkedIn and always happy to help. But again, Autism Society of Maine, they're right there in your backyard, and they're also willing to help.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I think you emphasized asking the questions and like sitting down and having the conversations. And I think, today is an example of us doing that. And hopefully our intent here is for this to be the starting point for some people to continue asking these questions, engaging in this conversation, and learning more. So yes, thank you so much, Carly. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise during this morning's training. You answered everyone's questions so carefully, and you covered so much information. You gave us some important action items and resources to have moving forward. So for that, we're so grateful.
Of course. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we'll be in communication with everyone who attended and all those who registered for today's event with some follow-up information so that you can get in contact with Carly, connect with her, as well as other resources in the area and throughout the country. And I would be remiss if I did not thank my chamber colleague, Riley Legier, for helping to produce yet another virtual event. And I also want to give another shout out to Springborn Staffing and Visit Portland for their generous support of this series throughout the season. You see, the chamber and our community couldn't have these conversations without that support. So thank you. And of course, thank you everyone for attending this morning and throughout the season. As I mentioned, if you're interested in learning more about today's topic and continuing the conversation with Carly, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with the appropriate contact information, this presentation, and links to additional resources. Now we look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday, May 6th for our next episode of Ideas, which Carly mentioned earlier on in her presentation. We'll be welcoming Tricia Grant, Executive Director of Just Love Worldwide, as an advocate for survivors of exploitation and a leader in the anti-trafficking movement. Tricia will lead a training focused on the identification and prevention of exploitation in the workplace, as well as best practices for treatment and providing resources for those either experiencing or recovering from trauma in the workplace. Employees and employers will walk away from next month's session with key resources vital to creating a welcoming work environment for their colleagues or employees, wherever they may be on their healing journey. So, all right, everyone, thank you so much for attending this morning. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again next month right here for another episode of Ideas.